Couple of things to respond to Steve. Couple of things. I think he said 3 or 4 times, I'm focused on the job in California. I mean, Steve Hilton was on Fox Business, Steve. You were on Fox Business 2 weeks ago. I watched it. You were on Fox Business talking specifically about Iran, defending Donald Trump's Iran war strategy. You didn't go on Fox Business and say to them what you said to Piers just now. You didn't say, I'm focused on California, I don't want to talk about Iran. You've mounted a very vociferous defense of Donald Trump's Iran war strategy. You said Iran will collapse or come to their senses. So you were a big defender of the Iran war 2 weeks ago.
That's exactly
not 3,
what I just
4
said.
months ago. But don't say that you're not focused on Iran. You literally went on Fox to talk about Iran.
I think the point is...
When Republican politicians run for office in deep blue states, they love to play a very specific double game. In local campaign speeches, they pretend to be hyper-focused on gas prices and everyday costs, throwing up their hands and claiming, I don't follow national politics. I don't comment on foreign policy. But the second they step onto Fox News, they turn around and aggressively defend Donald Trump's military strikes and threats of foreign war. That brings us to Steve Hilton, the Republican candidate for governor of California. Appearing on Piers Morgan Uncensored, Hilton tried to claim he doesn't pay attention to Trump's war in Iran or national foreign policy. There was just one major problem. Mehdi Hasan was sitting right across from him with the receipts. If you believe politicians should be held accountable when they tell blatant contradictions on national television, smash that subscribe button. I'm Neil. This is The Honest Perspective. You don't get to posture as an authority on cable news and then plead ignorance when you're caught on tape. Let me show you how this collapsed.
Well, Steve, maybe you could enlighten us. Let's talk about Iran, because obviously things like energy prices right now, globally, but especially in a state like California, they're ragingly high as a direct consequence of a decision taken by your ultimate leader, Donald Trump, in the White House. I said at the time it began this war, I thought it was a folly. I thought it could end up being a legacy-defining folly. I didn't think it could end in anything but where we found ourselves now, as a quagmire, which, if anything, I think has emboldened the Iranian regime. Far from dismantling it, they've discovered that by running a little strait of water, they can hold the entire world's energy as a sort of ransom. And by firing off missiles at their Gulf state neighbors, they're causing enormous damage to the business models of their neighbors too. So this, to me, objectively looks like it's going extremely badly. Would you defend what's happened here with this war?
Well, look, I try and avoid talking about things. I'm running for a particular job now, and I'm focused on the job at hand rather than having opinions on absolutely everything. But I act just on the gas prices point. It is obviously the case that gas prices are higher across the country, causing a lot of frustration. But it's also the case that they're even higher in California. In fact, if you just look at the numbers, just the prices, the effect of Democrat policies on gas prices in California is about double the effect of the Iran war. But you're right that, and Mehdi's right, that at the outset of this, really driven a lot by my future constituents, as I hope them to be, very strong Iranian American community, particularly in Los Angeles. There was real excitement about what was happening and the prospect of finally overthrowing this brutal authoritarian regime. And so, absolutely, at that time, I did express a hope that this would help overthrow that regime. Of course, that's a different argument than the one that was being made and is being made now about nuclear weapons. That's obviously the initiating factor here. But a lot of that, by the way, was driven by my background. My parents are Hungarian, and both my parents, and there's a really strong feeling among Hungarians. There was a very similar situation, 1956, the biggest date in Hungarian history, where there was a student revolution against the puppet regime that the Soviets put in there. It actually started in our hometown with students, and there was this hope that the West, either America or somewhat, would come in and help them. And there's this phrase that you hear from Hungarians the whole time: nobody came to help us. The Soviet tanks rolled in and crushed the revolution and ended up with another few decades of communist rule. And so there's a human aspect to it, I think, that also I was expressing at the time. I remember very clearly I spoke to a big crowd in the San Francisco Bay Area, Nowruz. It was the last day of Persian New Year, and there was just this real sense of optimism that this would go in the right way. But I I don't know exactly what's going on. That's not my focus. So I'm not commenting
Steve,
on every move in the war.
Steve.
Did you hear what Steve Hilton just said? He literally told Piers Morgan, "I'm focused on the job at hand rather than having opinions on absolutely everything. I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm not commenting on every move in the war." He wants California voters to believe he's just a local policy guy who doesn't track Trump's foreign policy decisions. But watch what happens when Piers Morgan reminds Hilton of his own tweets praising Trump's deterrence in Iran, and Mehdi Hasan steps in to blow up Hilton's cover story completely.
Steve, come on.
Well, hang on.
Couple of weeks
Steve,
ago.
Hang on.
Couple of weeks ago, you were on...
Mehdi,
Hold on,
it's
hold
okay.
on.
I've got
Couple
it.
of-
Mehdi, I've
Oh
got
my
it.
God.
Wait. I'll let you come in. I just want to. But you say you don't want to get involved, Steve, but you did when it started. Post on your X account, Trump and Iran. At home, we understand the importance of strength, deterrence, and accountability when it comes to crime. It's the same principle internationally. And I mean, my point to you would be, very interestingly, you were clearly under the impression the original aim was regime change, as a lot of people were, because that was the mood music coming out of the White House. Very quickly, when that looked like it was not going to happen, because the IRGC remained in tight control of the country, the people weren't uprising at all. The Ayatollah had been killed, but his son took over, who apparently is even more hardline. And you had the asymmetric stuff going on with Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf state neighbors and so on. You know, when you put it all together, this is my problem with this war. I think that originally, that probably was the aim. But very quickly they realized this isn't happening. And to the Iranian people you've talked, I'm in Los Angeles now. And I've spoken to a lot of Iranians who live here. And there was a genuine feeling of hope that there might be a chance to finally get rid of this regime. But that evaporated very quickly. And I bet if you went and talked to the same people that you were just alluding to, they would all feel incredibly disheartened that actually, far from getting rid of this regime, I honestly believe they've got more leverage now and feel more emboldened, particularly given the constant posting by President Trump of, we're going to annihilate you one minute, we'll do a deal the next, I can work with these people, they're all crazy lunatics. The constant contradictory posting about this, I think, has led them to conclude he's the emperor with no clothes. He's the boy that cried wolf. That's not good for the United States. It's not good for anybody. It just means that this regime now, I think, have got their gander up and feel emboldened.
Yeah, but it's also not over. I mean, we're in the middle of it. And I think that sense of hope is still there among some people, and I certainly feel it. But as I say, I'm just not focused on, because I don't have the information, on what is going on day by day. But I still have that sense of optimism because it's something that I think was... Yeah, I do.
Steve, I mean, look,
in the sense
I say
of
do
hoping.
you. I say do you. Well, I'm slightly incredulous on 2 points. One, that you want to be governor of this gigantic state, but have no idea what's happening with the biggest news story in the world on a daily basis. And secondly, that you've got hope this is all going to end well. I'd find that slightly
Well, I have no
implausible. Now,
influence
Mehdi,
over it.
you wanted to jump in.
No, I just want to say, Piers, to your
no,
point, I
but
don't
you-
have any influence over it. I'm focused on the job I'm applying for, and that really has nothing to do with that. That's
So-
my point.
Couple of
Okay,
things
Mehdi?
to respond
Mehdi.
to Steve. Couple of things. I think he said 3 or 4 times, I'm focused on the job in California. I mean, Steve Hilton was on Fox Business, Steve. You were on Fox Business 2 weeks ago. I watched it. You were on Fox Business talking specifically about Iran, defending Donald Trump's Iran war strategy. You didn't go on Fox Business and say to them what you said to Piers just now. You didn't say, I'm focused on California, I don't want to talk about Iran. You've mounted a very vociferous defense of Donald Trump's Iran war strategy. You said Iran will collapse or come to their senses. So you were a big defender of the Iran war
That's my
2
hope.
weeks ago.
That's exactly
not
what I
3,
just
4
said.
months ago. But don't say that you're not focused on Iran. You literally
No,
went on Fox to talk about Iran.
I think the
right?
point
So-
is...
so
That is what a structural receipt looks like. Steve Hilton spent 5 minutes insisting he doesn't comment on national security or Iran. Then, Mehdi Hasan points out that just 2 weeks prior, Hilton went on Fox Business specifically to champion Donald Trump's Iran strategy, telling viewers that Iran would collapse or come to their senses. He wasn't avoiding foreign policy out of principle. He was dodging because he couldn't defend the direct economic consequences Trump's
So let me just
military
finish my other point.
escalation
Let me
has
just finish
had
my
on
other point.
global oil markets
On Iran and the
California
people of
gas
Iran. Of
pumps.
course, we all want the people
Now
of Iran
watch
to
as
be
Mehdi
free,
presses
to be
Hilton
secure,
on
to
the
have
most critical
dignity, to have
question
human
of all.
rights. But you're
Donald
supporting
Trump's
a president
threats against
who, a couple of
civilian
months ago,
infrastructure
threatened
and
genocide
international
against Iran.
law.
He said, I'm going to destroy the entire civilization tonight. Did you condemn him for that? In fact, in the last few days, he said, anytime Iran attacks a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, I will blow up a power plant or a bridge. That is a war crime, Steve. You can't just blow up power plants and bridges, civilian targets, because you don't like the opponent's strategy. That's against all the laws of war. So will you condemn Donald Trump for doing that? If you actually care about the Iranian people, why would you support a war that targets civilian infrastructure? Those are war crimes.
So the point I was just simply making, and it is a consistent one, which is that I, as at the start of this, all the way through and now, hope, as you do, that it will end with the removal of a regime that has brutally terrorized its people. As to the day-by-day operational conduct and the communication around that conduct, obviously that's nothing that is to do with the role of the governor of California, which is 100% my focus. So that's what I mean.
But it will
if
be,
you
but
ask me-
Steve, my point on that would be that I don't think the two are completely disconnected in the way you would maybe like us to think. I mean, apart from anything else, energy prices can determine whether the next governor of California has a good first couple of years or a very difficult first couple of years. And so this does have direct impact, unquestionably. And also, this could get a lot worse before it gets better. People like Ben Shapiro, big influences in the conservative movement, have been saying things like this. Let's take a look.
I get why people are confused and upset. It feels like things are stalemated, that they're getting broader and more difficult. Why? Well, because what the American people want is victory. There's this bizarre notion in foreign policy that the American people are deeply worried about the immediate cost of war to the enemy. That the American people, that we can't handle the ugliness of war for even a day, that every conflict has to be totally antiseptic. And here I'm not even talking about the American willingness to undergo casualties. No one in America wants American casualties. It's a tragedy and a horror. We do understand that war does come along with casualties, and we are willing to undergo those casualties in pursuit of an end and a victory for America.
What the fuck?
Now, Tucker Carlson, who, at one point was wedded ideologically with Shapiro and pretty much everyone on the right about things like this, said this by way of response. Obviously, this little freak, Shapiro, could go volunteer to fight the war himself, but of course he won't. He's got no interest in making any kind of personal sacrifice. None of them do. Israel's finance minister bragged the other day that having American soldiers fight Netanyahu's wars is the best for us. Smotrich doesn't want to die for Israel. Neither does Ben Shapiro. Dying for Israel is your job. There is, as you know now, a massive debate raging around Donald Trump about whether to get out of this and take what would be a pretty humiliating loss, or to double, treble, quadruple down and really go hard into Iran, possibly with ground forces. I don't think you can want to be governor of California and not have a view about which of those two things would ultimately be good for the many millions who live in this state.
Of course I don't have a view on that I'm putting here as part of my campaign for governor. I've got views on lots of things, Beard, but I'm not paid to have opinions. I'm running for a job. I'm applying for a job. Now, you mentioned energy prices. It's absolutely right. As I said earlier, that's a huge issue. It's the driving reason everything is so expensive in California. But just the other week, we filled up our campaign truck in LA, $6.49. We went to Texas for a couple of events. The next day, $3.49. The Iran war is going on in a world where both of those things are true. Our electric bills in California are more than double the national average. That's a result of the climate posturing of the government in California. It's not doing anything for the climate. It's not helping the environment. What it is massively increasing costs for working people and small businesses in California. That's what I'm focused on. We can lower gas prices. My pledge is $3 gas. We can cut electric bills in half in California by changing our policies here. Nothing to do with the Iran war, nothing to do with federal policy. I think one of the problems is that actually, even though we have this constitution that has this beautiful idea of federalism and decentralized power, which I strongly support. The political conversation, certainly here in California, revolves around national politics when we've got the power to change what happens for daily life here in California right here. And that is 100% what I'm focused on.
What Mehdi Hasan exposed in that segment wasn't just Steve Hilton's individual political gymnastics. It exposed the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the modern Republican Party's economic rhetoric. Steve Hilton's entire gubernatorial campaign centers on gas prices in California. He stands at gas stations in Los Angeles, pointing to $6 a gallon signs and blames local environmental regulations exclusively. Now, California does have higher fuel taxes and state-level climate regulations. Nobody denies that. But to claim that global energy markets and military conflicts in the Middle East have nothing to do with gas prices in California is absurd. Energy prices are globally integrated. When military escalations flare in the Middle East and Iranian forces threaten shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's petroleum flows, global crude benchmarks spike overnight. That crude price increase affects refineries in Texas, Ohio, and California alike. Hilton wants to ride Trump's coattails on conservative cable news, but when voters in California ask why their tank of gas costs more, he tries to pretend the president he endorses hasn't contributed to energy market volatility. Even more damning was Hilton's total freeze when confronted on international law. Mehdi directly challenged him on Trump's public statements threatening to bomb Iranian power plants and bridges if Iranian forces attacked shipping vessels. Under the Geneva Conventions, specifically Article 54 of Additional Protocol I, targeting civilian infrastructure vital to the survival of the civilian population like power grids and domestic transportation bridges is explicitly prohibited under international humanitarian law. When Mehdi asked Hilton directly, "Will you condemn Donald Trump for doing that?" "Those are war crimes," Hilton couldn't answer. He retreated right back to his canned line, "I'm applying for a job. That's nothing to do with the role of governor. This is the playbook." When a Republican candidate is talking to a friendly cable host, they express full alignment with aggressive foreign policy stances. But the second they are forced to confront the actual legal and economic consequences of those policies in front of a neutral audience, they claim they don't have the information or that it's not their focus. You cannot claim to be a champion of working-class families struggling with affordability while enthusiastically backing military escalations that drive up global energy costs. And you cannot posture as a defender of human rights while staying silent on explicit threats to target civilian infrastructure. Mehdi Hasan brought the exact receipts required to break through that media spin. If you believe political candidates should be held to their actual record instead of campaign talking points, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. I'm Neil. Truth over access. Always. That's The Honest Perspective. And that's where I'll leave you.